Hello everybody and welcome back to our series podcasts, and this is our part number 2. As you hopefully remember, last time in our introductory part we discussed the basis of our educational videos, the benefits of shifting towards the learner-centered approaches in 21st century. So we touched upon the two approaches, OHE and PPP. Also, we discussed how they might be useful from the perspective of teacher talking time reduction, and therefore switching from the teacher-centered to learner-centered ways.
In today's video, we are going to dive deeper into the study of strategies teaching PPP, providing you with the useful tips and interesting insight regarding these aspects. Also, we are going to start discussing the new lesson framework, TTT, Test, Teach, Test, and we will explain how to apply it in a modern and engaging way. So stay with us and you will know how to improve the efficiency level of your teaching.
So, let's begin. So, last time we took PPP as a good example of modern teaching. However, we thought some more and decided that this statement needs an explanation. Indeed, in case of taking PPP in a traditional form, it can be not that useful and even outdated. So let's discuss how not to spoil everything if you adhere to the PPP lesson framework. Okay, so PPP, presentation practice production, has been the bread and butter for language teaching for ages, right? And in many ways, it does its job nicely. However, if we are honest, it's not that perfect. Let's take a look at some of the common problems people have with the traditional PPP approach and why it might not be the best variant.
One of the biggest problems is that it can become way too focused on grammar rules. The presentation stage can easily turn into a long, boring lecture about the verb conjugations and the sentence structures. And it is a real tragedy if you teach German or Russian, for example. So, who actually enjoys that? The grammar becomes the goal of the lesson instead of just being a tool for communication. This overemphasis can make students feel like language learning is all about memorizing rules, and that can be super demotivating for them. And then there is the practice stage. Often this involves really controlled exercises like fill in the blanks, matching, that sort of things. So now there is nothing inherently wrong with those activities, and they can be useful for giving basis understanding at the first stages of drilling. But the problem is they often lack authenticity. They don't really reflect how people actually use language in the real world. And if our task is to teach students the language not for the good marks but for the application in real life, authenticity is vital.
So let's say the exercises are about ordering food in the restaurant. So they might be, for instance, like fill in the blanks, I'd like to order something and something, or act out a dialogue so it would sound like a conversation in the restaurant. However, the students can't speak freely, and in real life there are tons of different scenarios that the students can face in the restaurant. Also, in practice, the waiter might not even understand what you're asking from him. And the problem with these exercises is that they are too artificial. You are only taught to be a perfect client that orders by book. The real scenario might be completely different. In fact, reality is often messy and predictable and full of surprises. But traditional PPP sometimes fails to prepare a student for that. And actually, it's not only about PPP itself, it can be about any teacher-centered approaches, like the grammar translational method, which focuses on the paradigm where the students are to perceive the L2, their second language, through the lens of the L1. In GTM, we often appeal to the first language to describe something. The words are directly translated from L2 to L1, and the majority of students, majority of studying is based on the translation routine, which is extremely artificial.
So what happens? Students can succeed in the controlled exercises, but then they freeze up, then actually have to use the language in a real-world conversation. That because they haven't had enough opportunities to practice using the language in a meaningful, communicative way. And the main problem is that the traditional PPP puts too much emphasis on accuracy and not enough on fluency. It's like teaching someone how to build a perfect engine, but forgetting to teach them how to drive a car. And if we are not careful, PPP can create students who are grammatically correct, but communicatively incompetent. And that's not what language learning is all about, is it? That's why it's important to find ways to make PPP more engaging, authentic, and student-centered.
So, okay, we have found out the limitations of the old school PPP, but it doesn't mean we have to change everything. So the basic structure of PPP remains the same. It's presentation, practice, production. We just need to modernize it, maybe make it more engaging and keep it relevant to how people actually use language. The key is to forget about the boring grammar lectures and start with meaningful context. Instead of just presenting the rules for the past simple in isolation, why not to introduce them through a new article about a historical event or a short funny video clip about someone's disastrous weekend? That way, students are immediately seeing the language in action, understanding how it is used to convey real meaning. It is much better that students learn something historical instead of barely memorizing the rules for the past tense. This is especially applicable for those who already obtain A2, B1 levels and higher. Then we need to use authentic materials as much as possible. Think of real news articles, blog posts, song lyrics, movie scenes, podcasts, anything that native speakers actually use. These materials expose students to the language in its natural environment, helping them develop a better understanding of how it's really used. Plus, they are way more interesting than textbook dialogues. The problem with textbook dialogues is that people don't really talk like that. They seem pretty artificial. The authentic dialogue that the student actually reads gives a more real example of the language and the culture. And finally, we need to focus on communicative practice. Instead of just doing fill-in-the-blank tasks, give students opportunities to use the language in the real-world situations. That can be role plays, debates, discussions, presentations, anything that gets them talking and interacting with each other. The language can be used, for example, to order food in the restaurant. The students can create different situations that might happen in the real restaurant. For instance, what if the order came out wrong? What if the student has an allergy? What if the waiter doesn't speak English fluently? That kind of activity is much better than just repeating the dialogues from the textbook. Also, it helps to expand the vocabulary because you can face different situations. The point is, it's about creating a learning experience that's relevant, engaging, and prepares students to use the language confidently in the real world. By emphasizing meaningful context, authentic materials, and communicative practice, we can transform PPP from a dry, grammar-focused approach into a lively, student-centered framework for language learning. Let's make language learning about communication, not simply drilling.
Okay, let's talk about how to make modern PPP work for absolute beginners, those students who are just starting their language learning journey. The key thing to remember is scaffolding, meaning providing support that's gradually removed as their confidence and skills grow. It's like training wheel for language learning. First, meaningful. Context needs to be super visual and instantly understandable. Forget abstract grammar explanations. Use big, bright pictures, short animated videos, or even bringing real objects into the classroom using realia. For instance, if you are introducing the verb to eat, show pictures of different foods and people eating them. Mimic the action of eating. Use exaggerated facial expressions to show enjoyment or distaste. The point is to create a strong connection between the language and the real world without relying on complicated explanations. Keep sentence at first to just one word, then 2 words, and even 3. Second, then it comes to authentic materials. You need to be very selective and heavily modified, which decrease their authenticity, but still. A complex news article will just scare them. Instead, you may use some kind of picture books. You need to choose a book with simple repetitive phrases and clear illustrations. Also, you may use songs with easy to understand lyrics, clear pronunciation, and a catchy tune. Also, find the video clips. They should be short animated clips with subtitles and slow speech. Even better if in the subtitles there are a native language. Before you use any of these materials, pre-teach the key vocabulary. Focus on the most essential words and phrases they all need to understand and the context. Use visuals, gestures, and repetition to reinforce the meaning. Don't be afraid to simplify the language or adapt the material to make them more accessible. Third, communicate. Practice has to be carefully scaffolded as well. Forget open-ended discussions or debates. Start with highly structured activities that provide plenty of support. Here are some ideas. Firstly, sentence schemes. Give them sentence structures to help them express their ideas. For example, I like something because of something. My favorite color is... Simple role plays you can also use. Provide them with scripts or prompts that guide their conversation. Also, you might incorporate information gap activities. Give each student a different piece of information and have them ask each other questions to complete the tasks. For example, what is your favorite food? What is your favorite pet? And etc. In short, the main ideas are lots of visuals, keep it simple, lots of support, praise to raise motivation. The goal is to increase a supportive learning environment where beginners feel comfortable taking risks and experimenting with the language, even they make mistakes. Celebrate their efforts and focus on building their confidence. If you can create a positive beginning, they will be more eager to learn English, definitely.
Okay, now we switch to another thing, and it is TTT, Test, Teach, Test. It's a nice learner-centered framework that actually boosts teaching efficiency. And it's about personalized learning. The first test stands for the exploration of what students already know and crucially what they are missing. Think about it as about informal needs analysis, but not about a formal exam. And by the way, don't assign grades for this activity, not to demotivate students. The purpose is to diagnose what the students need. For example, instead of just asking if they know the past simple, give them a scenario-based task. Like you may ask, imagine you are telling a friend about your weekend and write a short paragraph. This reveals how they naturally use or don't use the target language, and then you can analyze their mistakes. The most efficient way is that students change the worksheets with each other. And after they are done, ask some volunteer student to read out loud. That means don't correct minor mistakes unless they cause a change of the meaning. In case they do, it's about grammar. But if they don't, it doesn't have such an impact, so you just better don't bother with those details. Then, based on what the worksheets show, categorize the type of mistakes. And this is already about the teaching stage. Instead of a common grammar lesson, you are now teaching according to specific student needs. So if you see widespread mistakes in irregular verbs, for example, that's what you focus on. Keep it concise, interactive, and relevant. For example, you may say, okay, I noticed many of you are forgetting the irregular past simple forms. Let's work together to create a chart and learn the forms. Please remind which forms you know, or like that. Also give the students a simple worksheet for practice with these verbs. The teaching staff should also be as active as it can. Ask questions and try to have a conversation and boost communication. Finally, the second test. The special thing is that you give them the same test as you did in the beginning. Since the memory is still fresh, students will surely make significantly fewer mistakes. They will see how their results have improved, which will contribute to their motivation and positive reaction to learning. And this is a very interesting and unconventional approach. Once again, forget about conventional lessons. Modern TTT is about becoming a true explorer, let's say. So first you see what your students actually struggle with, then you zoom in on that specific problem with a short focused activity, and finally you give them a chance to use what they learned. You are not just lecturing, you are helping them to overcome their problems, and they are additionally learning from each other if you introduce communicative activities.
So, dear friends, we've unlocked some practical ways to revitalize PPP and TTT, making them more engaging and student-focused. Remember, it's about creating real-world connection and pushing learners to take the lead.
Now we challenge you to pick at least one activity we discussed today and implement it in your next lesson. See what happens. You may share in comments.
And if you are hungry for even more innovative approaches, join us for podcast 3.
See you there!
Bye-bye!